I wasn't on the guest list. Not in print, not in pencil, not even as an afterthought. I found out my little sister was getting married from a tagged photo on our aunt's Instagram. She was standing in a white gown holding our mother's hand beaming under twinkling lights. There were flowers. A string quartet. My family smiling as if I had never existed. No one called. No one asked if I was okay. I had paid Lydia's tuition. Held her hair back when she threw up from anxiety. Given up job interviews to drive her to class. But on her biggest day, I was not even a shadow in the room. So I did what they never expected. I stopped waiting to be chosen. I said yes to the man who had waited patiently for me to remember my worth. We flew to Santorini. Just us. No drama, no guilt, no family. I wore a red silk dress and let the wind tangle my hair. I posted one photo from the bow of our boat. No tags. No faces. Just a caption. Not all families are worth RSVPing for. 3 days later, Lydia called me in tears. Her wedding had imploded. Her mother-in-law had withdrawn everything. And somehow all eyes turned to me, the sister who never even received a save the date. But this isn't a story about revenge. It's about quiet survival, about finally walking away from the rooms that taught you how to disappear. My name is Natalie Quinn, and this is the story of how they tried to write me out, and I rewrote myself instead. I was 10 years old the first time I realized my mother looked through me instead of at me. It was a Sunday morning in Plano, Texas, and Lydia had a fever. She was curled on the couch, cheeks flushed, nose dripping, and Mom sat beside her with a cold compress and a gentle hand on her forehead. I stood in the kitchen doorway, holding the drawing I'd spent all night finishing for the school art contest. My fingers were smudged with charcoal. My shirt had a tear from leaning over the desk too long. I waited for Mom to look up to say something, anything, but she never did. All she said was, "Get your sister some ginger tea, honey." That's how it always started. Small things. Quiet erasures. A missed compliment. A forgotten school award. The way Lydia's ballet recitals got bouquets and family dinners while my debate trophies collected dust on the hallway shelf. Dad was around, sort of. He fixed the sink when it leaked, watched the Weather Channel, and took us to IHOP once a month. But he wasn't the kind of father who stepped in. He was the kind who leaned back. When Mom said things like, "Lydia's always had such a delicate temperament," or "Nat can handle herself, you know how strong she is," he'd nod, sip his coffee, and turn the page of his paper. By the time I hit high school, I stopped asking for things. I figured out how to get scholarships on my own. I did my own FAFSA forms, got a part-time job at the library, and made sure Lydia had help with her essays. I remember writing her college application while she was at a party. She texted me from the backseat of someone's car saying she forgot the deadline was that night. I stayed up until 3 in the morning finishing it. She got in. I went to Duke. She went to Texas State. My parents visited her 3 times during her freshman year. They came to my graduation once late and brought a card with $20 in it. I wasn't surprised. I'd learned by then to stop hoping for something different. After college, I moved to Los Angeles. I built a career in investment strategy. Long hours, high stress, sharp suits, even sharper tongues. I was good at it. I climbed fast. I made money. I bought my own place. I sent Lydia money when she needed to break a lease. I paid the copay when Mom had knee surgery. I flew home for Thanksgiving. I brought wine and gifts and left feeling like an outsider in my own bloodline. But I didn't say anything. I kept showing up. I kept trying. Then came my 30th birthday. I had planned nothing big. I wasn't the type. But I took the day off work, booked a table for 3 at a small Italian place in West Hollywood, and called my parents a week before to invite them. Mom sounded distracted. "Oh, that's next Saturday. I think your father has a doctor's appointment in the morning. Maybe we'll see how we feel." I told her I'd reserved the table for 6:30. She said she'd let me know. They never showed up. At 6:45, I was still holding the menu, half reading it, pretending not to notice how the waiter kept glancing toward the empty seats. I finally texted my mom. No reply. I opened Instagram out of habit and saw a post from Lydia. She was at a vineyard outside, Austin, laughing over a charcuterie board. The caption said, "Weekend with the fam." I stared at it for a long time. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, still wearing the black dress I'd picked for the occasion, and poured myself a glass of wine. One glass turned into two, then three. At some point, I took out my phone and scrolled through photos from Lydia's birthday 2 years earlier. They'd rented out a small event space. There were string lights and a live guitarist. A cake the size of a wagon wheel. Mom had worn her pearl earrings. Dad gave a toast. Lydia wore a white jumpsuit and posed next to a giant metallic 28. I closed the album and turned off my phone. It wasn't the forgetting that hurt, it was the consistency. The quiet pattern of being left out, of being remembered only when needed, of being the one who always showed up but never got a seat at the table. That was the night I stopped making excuses for them. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I just let the silence sit. And in that silence, something in me shifted. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and opened my email. Work things. Numbers. Deals. An investor lunch in Westwood. I moved through it all with mechanical precision, like slipping into an old uniform. But underneath the surface, I felt it. That strange weightlessness when something inside you has snapped and you're too calm about it. I opened Instagram. Bad habit. It was just muscle memory at that point. I wasn't looking for anything. But there it was. A photo from Aunt Meredith. Lydia stood in front of a full-length mirror at a bridal boutique in Fort Worth, her hand clutching the bodice of a white lace gown. Her eyes were teary, dramatic, tilted just so. The caption said, "Our girl is going to be the most stunning bride this July. So honored to be there for the big moment." July. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I registered the word. I blinked, then scrolled. There were more photos. Lydia smiling with Mom. Lydia surrounded by friends I didn't recognize. One shot showed her sipping champagne, a fake sash that read "Future Mrs. Whitford" draped across her shoulder. No tag, no mention of me. I texted my mother. "I just saw Meredith's post. Lydia's getting married." No reply. I texted again. "When were you going to tell me?" The bubbles appeared for a second, then disappeared. I sat back on the couch, heart slowing, mind speeding up. This wasn't just forgetting. This was deliberate. A wedding is not a surprise. It's planned. It's funded. It's discussed for months. And they had kept it from me entirely. I opened Lydia's profile. Blocked. I closed the app, tossed my phone onto the table, and stared out the window at the traffic on La Cienega. Horns, heat. The endless churn of people going somewhere. My phone buzzed. It was Alyssa. "Want sushi or rage drinks tonight?" I sent back one word. Both. That evening we met at our usual spot in Koreatown. Alyssa was already 2 sake bombs in by the time I arrived. Her lipstick was smudged and she waved me over with both hands. "Tell me everything," she said. I slid into the booth, told her about the Instagram post, the radio silence, the block. "She didn't even text you?" Alyssa asked, wide-eyed. "I mean, that's not passive-aggressive, that's just surgical." She took a sip from her glass, leaned closer. "You know what this is, right? What you're too successful. They can't control you anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "Seriously," she said. "You used to be the responsible one, the fixer. You paid for her school stuff. You flew home for every holiday. You never made a scene. Now you're out here living in LA making 6 figures, dating Nolan Graves, and she's still stuck in Fort Worth playing princess with some guy who probably thinks quinoa is a religion." I laughed despite myself. "They don't invite you because you remind them what they're not." That felt too sharp to argue with. So I said nothing. just stared down at the swirling ice in my glass. "When's the wedding?" Alyssa asked. "July. That's all I know." She tapped her phone. "Hold up. I saw something on Facebook. I think her fiancé's mom is Joanna Whitford, the hotel chain woman. She's got money. Like old money. If Lydia marries into that family, she'll do anything to fit in." I nodded, feeling something hard settle in my chest. "You're not invited because you don't fit the narrative," Alyssa added. "You're the inconvenient truth." I looked at her. "You've been hanging out with too many screenwriters." She grinned. "Facts are facts, babe." We clinked glasses and drank in silence for a while. Later that night, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and checked Nolan's calendar. He had a business trip in New York the second week of July. Meetings with a development firm about a joint venture in Soho. He'd asked me a few days ago if I wanted to come. I told him I'd think about it. I checked my own schedule. I had 3 client presentations, a quarterly review, and a team offsite planned. I stared at the dates, then slowly reached for my phone. Still no reply from Mom. I closed the laptop. The wedding would happen without me. And that used to be the part that broke me. That I was excluded. Erased. But now, for the first time, I saw the outline of a choice. A door that had been shut was now irrelevant. I didn't need to knock on it anymore. Instead, I started thinking about other doors. And what might happen if I walked through one without asking permission? I didn't make a plan, not at first. I just started packing a small suitcase the next day, folding things into neat squares without overthinking. Business slacks, a black sheath dress, 2 silk blouses, my favorite blazer, lipstick the color of certainty. My passport just in case. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay in that version of my life any longer. Nolan had mentioned the trip to New York weeks ago. Meetings with a design firm about a midtown redevelopment dinner with potential investors, a stop by a private equity panel he'd been invited to speak at. He'd asked if I wanted to tag along. At the time, I'd said maybe. I didn't have a reason then. But now I did. When I told him I was coming, he didn't ask why. Just glanced up from his tablet, gave me a slow smile, and said, "Good. I was hoping you'd say yes." We landed at JFK on a Thursday morning. June was soft and heavy in the air, the kind of humidity that stuck to your neck. Our car wound through the city while I watched the skyline shift into view, that stubborn Manhattan silhouette I once dreamed of living in when I was 19 and naive. The Mercer was quiet, the kind of expensive that doesn't have to say so. Our suite was minimalist and cool, bathed in light and pale wood and too many pillows. Nolan had a call lined up 10 minutes after we arrived. I left him with his laptop and his second espresso and took a walk down Prince Street, trying to shake the nerves buzzing just beneath my skin. I stopped at a bookstore, bought a novel I had no intention of reading, and let myself be invisible among the shelves. That was something New York had always been good for. Disappearing without vanishing. That evening we had dinner reservations at a place in Tribeca. I couldn't pronounce the kind of restaurant that never listed prices and offered 12 types of salt. I wore the black dress I'd packed last minute and tried to remind myself to breathe. Nolan noticed. "You're quiet," he said once we sat down. "Not like you." I shrugged. "Just tired. From work. From pretending things don't bother me." He didn't push. He just nodded, reached for the wine list, then paused. "Do you want to talk?" "Not here," I said. He nodded again. We ate in near silence. The server kept checking in, offering delicate questions about sauces and pairings. I barely touched my food. Later, back at the hotel, I stood by the window with a glass of water and stared at the city lights like they owed me something. Nolan leaned against the doorway to the bedroom, tie loose sleeves rolled. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" "I know." "Then say it." I turned toward him slowly. My voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't emotional. Just level. "Lydia's getting married in July." He blinked once. "You just found out on Instagram." "Wow." "Yeah." He waited. I let the silence hang before continuing. "They didn't tell me. Didn't invite me. She blocked me last year after a fight and apparently decided that was permanent. My mom never said a word. I had to see it through someone else's phone. Like a stranger. Nolan stepped further into the room. I'm sorry. I nodded, not expecting more. Then I added, it's not even the wedding. It's everything before it. The pattern. The way I was always the fixer. The one they leaned on when they needed money or help or a place to stay. And now that she has some guy with a fancy last name, I'm disposable. You're not disposable, he said softly. Number, I'm dangerous. Because I know the truth. Because I remember who paid for Lydia's first semester at Texas State when Dad's insurance lapsed. Because I remember writing her college essays and covering the copay when Mom had her gallbladder surgery. I was the safety net. And now I'm the embarrassment. Nolan crossed the room, stood next to me. You were never an embarrassment. I know that. But they don't. And I'm tired of waiting for them to figure it out. I set the glass down. I'm tired of asking to be let in. Of trying to be good enough for people who only value me when I'm silent and helpful. Nolan's eyes didn't move from mine. Then stop asking. He said it so easily, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I let that settle in the air between us. You know, he said quietly, you've spent your whole life twisting yourself into shapes to be accepted by people who refuse to see you. Maybe it's time you stop doing that. Maybe, I echoed. He reached for my hand. Not dramatic, just grounding. I want something with you, Natalie. Something that doesn't require you to shrink. Something where you don't have to prove yourself every damn day. I didn't breathe for a moment. What are you saying? He looked down like the words mattered more than the delivery. Would you want a life where you never have to ask to be seen? The question cut through the quiet like a thread pulled taut. It wasn't a proposal in the traditional sense. There was no ring. No kneeling. No sunset background or scattered rose petals. Just a man. And a choice. I didn't need to think about it. Yes. One word and something unspoken between us finally exhaled. We didn't toast. We didn't post a photo. He just kissed my forehead, then turned off the light while I stood a little longer by the window. The city didn't look different. But I did. For once I wasn't on the outside waiting to be invited in. I had finally chosen a door that was already open, and I walked through it. The Monday after we got back from New York, I sat at my desk at Westmount Capital and stared at the numbers on the screen like they were written in another language. Spreadsheets, blurred strategy decks blinked from the desktop, but none of it felt real. Not the quarterly forecast. Not the team huddle at 9. Not the Slack messages piling up from junior analysts asking for last-minute approvals. I closed my laptop. Then I opened a new email draft. Subject line, leave of absence request. Except I didn't ask, I stated. Effective immediately, I will be stepping away from my position at Westmount Capital. This decision is not made lightly, but it is made clearly. No return date. No explanation beyond what they already knew but never said aloud. That I had been carrying too much for too long. That I had smiled through weekends, lost to pitch meetings, through skipped holidays, through being the only woman in rooms where everyone else measured themselves in golf scores and venture portfolios. I hit send. Saturday back. Exhaled. Later that evening, Nolan walked into the kitchen while I was reheating leftover pasta and said, "Pack light." I turned. For what, he pulled out his phone, flipped it around. A hotel confirmation. A map. Blue seas. Curved white rooftops. Santorini. I blinked. Seriously? He shrugged, casual as ever. You need air, sunlight, distance. No better place than a cliffside villa with an infinity pool and no agenda. I smiled, small at first, then wider. When next Friday? 10 days. Just us. And no laptops. I stepped toward him. Did you plan this today? He tilted his head. I may have booked it a few days ago. Just in case you came back different from New York. I laughed. You're either psychic or presumptuous. Both probably. The next day I told Alyssa. She squealed loud enough to make the barista at Common Ground flinch. Santorini? Oh, we're not playing around anymore. She reached into her oversized tote and pulled out a dress bag. You planned this. I planned for the day you stopped playing small. She unzipped the bag to reveal a crimson silk slip dress, bias cut deep, back high slit, unapologetically bold. It's from that designer I told you about. Taylor Esme. Handmade. One of one. Alyssa. Don't argue. Just wear it. And please, for once in your life, don't try to blend in. This is not a trip for neutrals. I traced the fabric between my fingers. It felt like permission. She leaned in. This isn't revenge. It's presence. Show up so fully they choke on the silence you left behind. I hugged her. Harder than I expected. The week passed in a blur. I cleaned out my inbox, set my work phone to airplane mode, paid off the last of Lydia's old medical bill that still somehow sat in my name. One final tie snipped without ceremony. Nolan handled the flights. Business class. Window seats. He added a note to the itinerary labeled Sunset Photographer. When I asked, he just smiled. You'll see. At the airport, I wore a cream linen set and oversized sunglasses, the kind of outfit I used to laugh at in magazines. Nolan carried nothing but a backpack and a paperback novel. We didn't speak much in the lounge. We didn't need to. Somewhere over the Atlantic, he turned to me and said I was thinking we should make this official. I raised an eyebrow. The trip us. My stomach fluttered, but I kept my face steady. Is this your version of a proposal? His grin was lazy, sure. Would it scare you if it was number? Would you say yes? Maybe. Then I'll keep the maybe and work with that. The island air hit us like a slow exhale. Santorini was bluer than the photos, wider, deeper. Every corner curved into light. Our villa was perched on the edge of Oya white walls and cobalt shutters, an open-air terrace that looked like it had been carved out of a dream. I slipped into the red dress on our second night. No makeup, just gold hoops and bare skin. Nolan stood at the edge of the terrace, drink in hand, watching the horizon. When he turned and saw me, his expression changed. You look like closure and beginning all at once. I stepped out barefoot. The photographer he'd hired was already there, discreet and professional. He didn't pose us. Just followed as we laughed, leaned into each other, moved with the sea behind us. That night Nolan toasted to nothing specific. We clinked glasses under a sky that knew better than to interrupt. Later in the quiet, I lay in bed with the windows open, the sea breathing in and out. Somewhere in Texas, Lydia was probably finalizing seating charts and florals. She was surrounded by guests and plans and a version of the life she always said she wanted. But I had something else. Not a wedding, not a perfect family. Just this stillness. This knowing. And a passport marked with a beginning no one saw coming. The mornings in Santorini had their own rhythm. No alarms, no meetings, just the rustle of linen curtains and the soft call of seabirds outside our villa window. I would wake before Nolan, not out of habit, but because something in me couldn't stay asleep too long. Rest had become something different here. Less escape, more arrival. On our third morning, I made coffee and drank it barefoot on the terrace while the sky shifted from pearl to gold. The air was warm but not heavy. The sea stretched wide, glittering and endless. Nolan wandered out an hour later, hair messy, shirt wrinkled, holding his phone and a box of fresh pastries he'd walked into town to get. You looked like you needed honey and almonds, he said, kissing my shoulder. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. Some connections don't sharpen in words. They soften in stillness. Later that afternoon, a sleek boat pulled up along the cliffside dock. It wasn't extravagant, but it was perfect. White hull, teak deck, clean lines. A local captain named Stavros greeted us with a warm nod and a quiet smile. He had sun-darkened skin and a calmness that made it feel like nothing bad had ever touched the sea. Nolan helped me aboard, then handed Stavros a small envelope. I didn't ask what was in it. He just said private route please. Sunset return. I wore the red dress. No makeup. Just salt-sprayed hair and skin that had forgotten to worry. The fabric clung to me like it had always belonged there. Alyssa had been right. Some clothes weren't for blending in. They were for declaration. We pulled away from the shore, cutting across the Aegean like a silent secret. The wind danced around us. I stood at the bow, holding the railing, eyes fixed on the horizon. Nolan was behind me somewhere, his presence steady but quiet. He snapped a photo without asking. I turned halfway toward him. Let me see. He held up the phone. The image was arresting. The red dress against the pale blue water. My back to the camera. Shoulders bare, hair tangled in the wind. I didn't look like someone waiting for approval. I looked like someone who had stepped into her own name. Post it, he said gently. I hesitated. Then opened Instagram. The caption came without effort. Not all families are worth RSVPing for. I hit share. Then closed the app. We spent the next hour sun-drenched and silent, sipping white wine and watching the coastline slide past in slow motion. At one point, Stavros pointed out a cove where the cliffs curved like folded wings. Nolan leaned back on the cushioned bench, eyes half-closed, hand resting on my knee. Thank you, I whispered. For what? For this. For not needing me to explain myself. He smiled. You've already done the hard part. You stayed when you should have left. Now you're just catching up to your own freedom. We anchored in a quiet inlet and dove into the water, the cold shocking at first, then exhilarating. We floated on our backs, fingers brushing the sun overhead, a soft white burn. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt my body move without tension. By the time we returned to the dock, the sun was low, the light thick and honeyed. Stavros helped me off the boat like I was royalty. I thanked him in a voice I barely recognized as my own. It was steadier now, less cautious. Back at the villa, I showered and wrapped myself in a towel, scrolling absently through my phone while Nolan uncorked a second bottle of wine. My notifications had exploded. Likes, comments, messages. People I hadn't heard from in years were suddenly resurfacing. The photo had gone farther than I expected. A screenshot of it had landed in a private Facebook group for wedding professionals in Dallas. From there it found its way to an acquaintance of Lydia's. Then to a girl we both knew in college. Then finally to someone named Harper Whitford. The name struck me. I tapped her profile. Joanna Whitford's niece. CEO of Whitford Hospitality. Thomas's mother. Harper had tagged Joanna in a private thread with the caption, "Thought you'd want to see this. Heard some interesting things about the Quinn girl. Isn't Lydia marrying her brother?" I froze. Nolan looked up from the wine. Everything okay? I handed him the phone. He read it slow and careful, then looked up. It begins. I nodded. Joanna Whitford wasn't just another mother of the groom. She was old Dallas money. The kind of woman who vetted her son's fiancé like she was hiring a CFO. Reputation mattered to her. Legacy mattered more. And now she had questions. About the sister no one had mentioned. About the family that had painted itself a little too neatly. About a caption that said more in 12 words than Lydia had probably said in a year. Nolan set the phone down. You didn't mean to start a fire, did you, number? But I stopped apologizing for being the match. I stood cross to the terrace and looked out over the water. The breeze picked up, catching the edges of my towel, and I held it tighter around me. Somewhere in Texas, Lydia was planning centerpieces and final fittings. Practicing how to say Whitford without sounding like she'd rehearsed it her whole life, but she'd forgotten something. Silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes it just means someone else is watching. And waiting. Joanna Whitford read the caption 3 times before setting her phone down. She didn't like being surprised. In her world, surprises cost money, headlines, and control. Control was what kept her name pristine across boardrooms and ballrooms alike. So when someone whispered that her future daughter-in-law's estranged sister was now a viral silhouette in a red silk dress, Joanna took notice. The first call she made wasn't to Lydia, it was to her assistant Karen. Pull every public record on Natalie Quinn. Education, employment, property, published articles. Start with Los Angeles. And pull Lydia's file while you're at it. Karen didn't ask questions. She never had to. By the end of the day, a folder landed on Joanna's desk at the Whitford Hospitality corporate office in Dallas. It was thick-clipped at the edges. She read every page, every resume line, every conference Natalie had spoken at, every headline that mentioned her name. Duke University class of 2015. MBA with distinction. Former director of strategic investment at Westmount Capital. Currently on sabbatical. Joanna raised an eyebrow. Then she flipped to Lydia's file. Texas State University. Graduated 2018. Degree Communications. GPA average. A few PR internships, including one at the Whitford Group, which she had acquired with some charm, and a padded resume. Joanna frowned. She remembered that internship. Lydia had said she was from a private liberal arts college in the Northeast. Claimed she transferred mid-degree due to family illness. There was even a fake alumni pin on her blouse the first time they met. Joanna reached for her desktop, opened the company's server, and pulled up archived onboarding files. It took less than a minute to find it. An email dated July 2021 from Lydia Quinn to HR. Attached, please find my updated resume. I've included my academic history from Greystone College in New York. Please update my profile accordingly. I believe the Whitford Group values discretion and legacy, and I want to make sure I represent both fully. There was no Greystone College in her academic record. Because there was no Greystone College at all. Joanna clicked through to the attachments. The file was amateur. A template resume filled with inflated titles and fabricated internships. She scrolled back to Lydia's onboarding photo. Polished. Poised. Smiling just a little too wide. She sat back and pressed her fingers together. Someone had sold her a story. And Joanna hated being sold something she didn't vet herself. The next morning she called her son. Thomas answered on the second ring. Hey Mom. Can you stop by the house this evening? We need to talk. Privately. Sure. Everything okay, just some pre-wedding housekeeping. When he arrived, she was in the conservatory sipping mint tea and waiting beside a folder she hadn't touched since breakfast. She didn't offer him anything to drink. Just gestured for him to sit. What's going on? Thomas asked. Tell me what you know about Lydia's family. His face twitched. She's close with her mom. Distant from her dad. Says she lost touch with her sister years ago. Joanna nodded. That's one version. There's another, yes. One that includes a very present, very successful sister named Natalie, whose career is not only impressive but verifiable. Thomas blinked. Wait. Natalie, like the woman in the photo everyone's talking about, the one in Greece. Yes. That's Lydia's sister. It appears so. Why would she lie about that? You tell me. Thomas rubbed his temples. She always said things were complicated. That Natalie had cut ties, that they weren't close. Did she mention where she went to college? Some small school in New York, I think. She said she transferred. I never thought to Greystone College. Yeah, maybe. Joanna opened the folder and handed him the printout. There's no such institution. Not accredited. Not recognized. Possibly fabricated. Thomas scanned the document, lips tightening. You're telling me she lied about her degree. She lied about more than that. He dropped the paper on the table. This is a mess. Joanna didn't blink. It's a warning. And I don't take warnings lightly. What do you want me to do? I want you to talk to her. I want you to ask her to explain. And I want you to think very carefully about the kind of family you're attaching yourself to. Thomas leaned back stunned. We're getting married in 3 weeks. Then you should be certain. She didn't say anything more. He left 10 minutes later, folder in hand. Joanna stood at the window and watched his car pull away. Then she turned back to her desk and opened her laptop. She typed Natalie Quinn into the search bar. She wasn't done watching. Not yet. I woke up to sunlight slicing across the sheets and a dozen new messages lighting up my phone. Notifications blurred across the screen, names I hadn't seen in years blinking back at me. Cousins, high school classmates, even one of Lydia's old sorority sisters from Texas State. They weren't asking questions. They were making confessions. Didn't know you two weren't speaking. You look amazing. Just saw your post. That dress. That confidence. Wow. Family's complicated. I get it. You deserve peace. The tone had shifted. Not pity. Not curiosity. Something closer to reverence. Like they'd all witnessed a resurrection and didn't quite know what to do with it. Nolan was still asleep, one arm thrown over his eyes, chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of someone completely unbothered. I slid out of bed, pulled on a robe, and stepped onto the terrace with my coffee. Santorini shimmered beneath the morning haze, white rooftops catching the sun like they were holding it hostage. The air was still humming. My phone buzzed again. A message from Aunt Clara. Honey, I don't know what's happening, but I just want you to know I'm thinking of you. No one deserves to be left out like that. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my gallery and chose 3 photos. One of Nolan and me on the boat laughing with wind-slicked hair. One of us having dinner on the terrace, wine glasses mid-toast. And a short video of the sun melting into the water, casting everything in a shade of gold that didn't feel real. I stitched them together and uploaded. Caption: I choose to live, not to retaliate. Posted. It didn't take long. Within an hour, the comments rolled in. Friends. Strangers. The algorithm doing what it does best. But then came the texts. From my cousin Rachel: I had no idea they didn't invite you. That's so wrong. From my Uncle James: you always carried more than your share. We saw it. We just didn't say anything. And from someone I hadn't heard from since Lydia's graduation party: Lydia's freaking out. I don't think you realize what you've started. I set the phone down and sipped my coffee. The wind picked up a little, brushing my cheek like it had something to say. Nolan joined me 15 minutes later, shirtless, squinting into the sun. You're famous again, he murmured, nodding toward my phone. Not the kind of famous I planned for. You didn't plan it at all. Exactly. He sat beside me, took my coffee, sipped it without asking. Any regrets? I thought for a second. Only that I waited this long to stop playing small. Later that afternoon, I received a message from someone I hadn't expected. Camille. One of Lydia's old college friends. The kind who always hovered just close enough to benefit from proximity, but never close enough to know anything real. Her message was brief. She's unraveling. Just thought you should know. I didn't respond. But I did reread it. Unraveling. It was the word I'd always feared would apply to me. Back when I held everyone else together. But it wasn't me fraying this time. It was the image Lydia had curated for years. The perfect younger daughter. The polished bride-to-be. The one who didn't need a sister because she had everything under control. Turns out that image was thinner than we all thought. By evening, another message came in. This one from my younger cousin Marcus. Just spoke to your mom. She's trying to keep things quiet, but Lydia's losing it. She thinks you're going to ruin the wedding. Said she's never felt so betrayed. I stared at the words. Ruin the wedding. Betrayal. As if absence could be that loud. As if living well was an act of violence. Nolan glanced at me from across the room. Problem number: just family. He raised an eyebrow. The messy kind or the manipulative kind? Both. I went back to the terrace and sat on the stone bench. The sky was starting to change again, soft pinks brushing against the edges of the horizon. The island below buzzed with quiet motion. Tourists wandered. Locals closed shop for the day. But here above it all, time felt like it had paused just long enough for me to breathe. Then came the final message. From my cousin Elise. Lydia's spiraling. She thinks you planned all this. She said you're trying to destroy her. But honestly, I don't think she realizes how much of this she did to herself. Just be careful. You struck a nerve deeper than you think. I didn't answer. I just sat there listening to the wind rise again, louder this time, almost like applause. In a ballroom just outside of Nashville, the morning light filtered through crystal chandeliers, catching on the edges of perfectly arranged centerpieces that would never see guests. Servers stood still beside untouched tables. Musicians packed up their instruments without a sound. Joanna Whitford had arrived at the venue at 8:00 sharp, wearing a navy suit, no makeup, no jewelry except her watch. She didn't ask for coffee. She didn't greet the coordinator. She walked straight to the head of the planning team and said, "Shut it down." The planner blinked. "Excuse me, the reception, the banquet, the floral wall, the 6-tier cake. Cancel all of it. Strip it to family only." She didn't wait for questions. Joanna never did. By 9:30, the caterers were folding tablecloths. The photographer was reassigned to the ceremony only. Guests received discreet emails blaming an unexpected change in logistics. Inside the bridal suite, Lydia was sitting in her robe, makeup halfway done, hair curled and pinned in soft waves. Her phone buzzed nonstop, but her hands stayed still on her lap. When the wedding planner stepped in and quietly explained that the reception was no longer happening, Lydia blinked once. Then again. "What do you mean, no longer happening? Your future mother-in-law has pulled the funding. She's requested a scaled-back ceremony with only immediate family. No dinner, no music, no press." Lydia stared at her own reflection for a full 5 seconds before whispering. She said she loved the design. She signed off on the tasting. Yes, but something changed. Lydia stood slowly, walked to her phone, and opened the group thread. Dozens of texts, questions from friends, confusion from vendors, silence from Thomas. She dialed her mother. "Why aren't you doing anything?" Marilyn's voice came quiet and brittle. "Honey, it's Joanna's call. We don't have the money to cover what she's backing out of. You said this was under control." "I thought it was. I told you Natalie would ruin this." There was a pause on the other end. "This isn't about Natalie. This is about something Lydia did." But Lydia didn't hear that. Or maybe she refused to. She threw her phone onto the velvet bench, mascara smudging as she pressed her fingers against her eyes. An hour later, in a small chapel behind the main venue, a wedding took place with only 20 people seated. No flowers beyond the altar. No aisle runner. No pianist. Just Thomas, his face unreadable, standing beside a minister as Lydia walked toward him in a dress that suddenly looked heavier than it had hours ago. He didn't say much, neither did she. When they said their vows, she stumbled. Not over the words, but over the silence between them. At that very moment, 300 miles away, I was sitting in a cafe in Oya, the breeze warm on my arms, a cappuccino half finished beside me. Nolan had gone to pick up ferry tickets for a day trip to Paros. I was scrolling absent-mindedly when I got the alert. Verve Style had published their summer edition. I clicked the link without thinking. There I was. The Santorini photo. The red dress. My back to the camera. The caption, "Power without apology." It wasn't a feature on me. Just a photo accompanying an article about quiet reinvention. But my name was in the credits. Photo courtesy of Nolan Graves. Location Aegean Sea. Subject Natalie Quinn. My stomach twisted. Not from shame. From knowing. That image, that single captured moment, had made it farther than I ever intended. Farther than the Quinn family dinner table. Farther than Lydia's carefully curated guest list. I didn't share it. I didn't post a reaction. I just sat there, phone screen dimming in my palm, heartbeat even. Back in Nashville, whispers were starting. Aunt Janet leaned over to Uncle Mike during the ceremony and murmured, Did you see that picture of the sister? She's not here. No, she's not. And the mother's face, have you seen it? I think something's wrong. In the bridal suite after the vows, Lydia pulled Thomas aside. Why didn't you say anything about what about your mom? About canceling the reception. He shrugged. She told me last night. Said she had her reasons. I figured you'd talk to her. You're supposed to stand up for me. Maybe I'm tired of defending things that don't hold up. Her lips parted, stunned. He didn't look angry. Just done. She turned away, hands trembling, and saw her phone lighting up again. This time it was Camille. You didn't tell me your sister was a feature model now. Is this your version of cutting her out? It's not a good look. Lydia stared at the message, then at her reflection. Somewhere someone had posted the article. Then another. Then screenshots. And just like that, the story shifted. The wedding became less about a union and more about an omission. The question wasn't where was the sister, it was why she wasn't there. And the answer was written all over Lydia's face. The silence in the bridal suite after the guests left was louder than the ceremony itself. Lydia sat on the edge of the love seat, still in her gown, bouquet wilted beside her, mascara smudged in the corners of her eyes. Her phone lit up again and again. Notifications, missed calls, messages she didn't want to read. Everyone had questions, and none of the answers made her look good. Joanna had said nothing to her after the ceremony. Just a curt nod then, a quiet word to Thomas before leaving the chapel with her assistant in tow. No congratulations. No photos, no speech. Thomas had offered to drive Lydia home, but she refused. She said she needed a moment. What she really meant was that she needed to figure out how to undo something that couldn't be undone. She scrolled through the latest posts, and there it was again. My photo. The one on the bow of the boat in Santorini. Red dress, sea behind me, arms stretched slightly like I wasn't holding anything at all. It wasn't even the original post this time. It was a screenshot edited with text over it. When you erase people, they don't disappear. They evolve. Lydia dropped the phone into her lap, face pale. That night, just past midnight, my phone rang. I was half asleep, the soft rustle of waves outside the window of our Santorini villa like a lullaby. Nolan stirred beside me but didn't wake. I reached across the bed, saw her name, and for a moment considered letting it go to voicemail. I didn't. I answered and said nothing. The silence on the other end wasn't empty. I could hear her breathing, uneven and tense. Then softly, "Why did you do this?" My voice was calm. Do what? The post. The dress. The magazine. You knew it would get back to them. You knew Joanna would see it. I sat up in bed, feet touching the cool tile floor. You're upset because people finally saw me. I'm upset because you made my wedding about you. I laughed once quietly. You didn't invite me. You pretended I didn't exist. And now that I'm simply living, I'm the problem. You humiliated me. No, Lydia. I lived my life. You're humiliated because the lie unraveled. Because the story you told wasn't built to hold. She went quiet, but I could still hear her breath hitch. Joanna canceled the reception. My dress didn't even get photographed. Half the guests left early. You don't understand what you cost me. I shook my head slowly. You cost yourself that. You lied about who you were. About me. About everything. I didn't ruin your day. I just refused to stay invisible so you could shine without shadow. She sniffed, sharp and shaky. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Number. It was supposed to go exactly like this. Because you built something hollow, and when someone knocked gently, it collapsed. She was crying now. I could hear her try to stifle. It could imagine her wiping her face in the dark so no one nearby would notice. Still trying to preserve the picture. Still trying to control the frame. I didn't want it to be like this between us, she whispered. Then you shouldn't have blocked me. You shouldn't have lied. You shouldn't have let Mom pretend I didn't matter. Her voice cracked. I thought, maybe if I had one thing that was just mine. You always had that. You had everything. Attention. Support. No one ever questioned your softness. I gave you space, Lydia. I even gave you silence. But I'm done giving pieces of myself to people who don't know what they're holding. There was a pause. Then she asked, quieter than before. So what now? I don't know. But I'm not the one who needs to fix it. You hate me, number. I don't hate you. Then what do you feel? Nothing, I said. And that's how I know I'm finally free. She didn't respond. After a few moments, the call ended. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I just sat there, the breeze from the open window brushing against my skin like a benediction. I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. Nolan appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. That was her, yeah. You okay? Better than I expected. He reached for my hand, grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. Back in bed, I scrolled through my messages. Alyssa had sent 3 photos, all screenshots of the Verve-style preview layout. My photo was now the cover for their August edition. The title across the image read, Redefined Grace. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned the screen off. Nolan touched my arm. They published it. Yeah. What did they say? Nothing I haven't already said to myself. You gonna tell your family number? You gonna post it number? He paused. Why not? Because it doesn't matter if the world sees it. It only matters that she did. He nodded once, understanding. Always understanding. I lay back down, eyes open to the ceiling. The stars above Santorini were hidden behind clouds, but the wind carried something in it. Not applause this time. Something quieter. Peace. The transition back to Los Angeles felt softer than I expected. The air was warmer, thicker, more familiar. The sound of cars on Olympic Boulevard, the smell of roasted espresso on every corner, the slow afternoon light that settled over my neighborhood like a blanket. I unpacked my suitcase slowly, not because I was avoiding anything, but because I no longer felt rushed. The red dress went into the back of the closet, folded carefully inside tissue paper. Not a costume. Not a trophy. Just a reminder. Within a week, I signed the lease on a small office space in Culver City. It wasn't flashy. Just clean white walls, big windows, and a long walnut desk I'd had my eye on for years. I called it Quinn Strategies. The tagline was simple. We help women build what no one thought they could. By the end of the month, I had 3 clients. All women. One launching a line of adaptive clothing, one building a tech platform for small business payments, and one starting a nonprofit for single mothers re-entering the workforce. I met with them over coffee in the office on Zoom. I listened more than I spoke. I didn't pitch myself. I didn't need to. Word spread faster than I imagined. Verve-style's feature had cemented a version of me in people's minds that I hadn't even fully grown into. Suddenly, I was aspirational. Clean lines, quiet defiance, redefined grace. But I wasn't performing anymore. I was just being. At a networking event downtown, I met a woman named Cameron Shore. She ran a boutique venture capital firm that focused on women-led startups. She had short platinum hair, wore a black jumpsuit, and introduced herself with a handshake firm enough to suggest she was tired of being underestimated. We sat on a rooftop patio drinking iced tea while the city hummed below us. After 15 minutes of trading ideas, she leaned back and asked, "So, be honest. Are you the fiancé of Nolan Graves or just the face of a very compelling public narrative?" I didn't blink. "I'm me." She smiled. Good answer. She offered me a consulting contract 2 days later. The next morning I got the email. Subject meeting, request from Joanna Whitford. To Natalie at quinnstrategies.com. Natalie, I'd like to speak with you. If you're available, I'll be in Los Angeles next week. Wednesday afternoon. My assistant can coordinate. No agenda. Just a conversation. Best JW. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. I didn't reply immediately. I wasn't sure if it was curiosity or strategy that drove her to reach out. I wasn't sure it mattered. But something in the tone of that message struck me. No apology, no explanation, just an opening. That night, I told Nolan over dinner. She wants to meet, I said, passing him the roasted carrots. Joanna, I nodded. What for she didn't say. You gonna do it? I don't know yet. He chewed thoughtfully. You don't owe her anything. I know. He paused. But maybe she's not looking for something owed. Maybe she's trying to see what she missed. I considered that. Then shrugged. I'll think about it. The next morning I replied to the email. Wednesday works. My office. 200. I kept it brief. Polite. Measured. The day came quickly. I wore a navy suit and a white blouse. No jewelry. No makeup except lip balm. I wanted to meet her as I was. Not as a symbol, not as a headline, just as myself. At 159 she arrived. Joanna Whitford was taller than I remembered from photos. Impeccably dressed, naturally. Charcoal gray blazer, sharp black heels, no wedding ring. She shook my hand like we were negotiating terms. Thank you for meeting me. Of course. We sat. I poured us both water. She didn't touch hers. After a moment of silence, she said I didn't come here to apologize. I nodded. I didn't expect you to. But I came because I think I misjudged the picture. And now I want to understand the frame. That was the first time I considered that maybe some people didn't change because of confrontation. Maybe they changed because of clarity. She looked around my office, took in the photos of clients on the walls, the soft white couch in the corner, the stack of business cards on my desk. You've built something here. I have. That's not easy. Especially with your last name. I smiled faintly. That's why I use my first. She almost smiled. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded printout. It was the Verve-style article, the cover. My photo. She laid it on the table between us. They got one thing wrong, she said. What? This wasn't grace redefined. This was grace reclaimed. I didn't answer. She stood. I won't take more of your time. Just know I see you now. And I don't ignore what I see. I nodded. She left without shaking my hand again. And I sat there for a long moment listening to the quiet return. The light outside had softened into gold when I finally stood and locked the door behind her. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't overwhelmed by the noise of what came next. There was no anxious energy, no need to dissect every word of the conversation. I just felt clarity, weightless and precise. Later that night, after Nolan had fallen asleep beside me, I reached for my phone and checked my messages. There it was. A text from Lydia timestamped 11:07 p.m. A single image loaded slowly followed by a sentence. It was a newborn, tiny and pink and bundled in hospital linens. Her face was a miniature of Lydia's, lips parted as if she were sighing her way into the world. Do you want to meet your niece? No punctuation, no apology. Just that. I let the screen dim in my hand, the glow fading as I stared at the ceiling. For a moment, I felt the familiar tug of guilt, that instinctual part of me that still longed for connection. But it didn't pull hard enough. I didn't reply. Instead, I turned off the phone and pressed it beneath my pillow, like hiding it would soften the question. The next morning came quietly. Sunlight filtered through our bedroom window and the scent of brewed coffee drifted from the kitchen. Nolan had left me a sticky note on the counter. Had early meetings, love you. P.S. You were amazing yesterday. I smiled, poured myself a mug, and walked to the window. Outside, Los Angeles was already humming to life. A jogger passed by with her golden retriever. A delivery truck rumbled down the street. I breathed in, grounded and steady. At the office, I was reviewing client strategy notes when an assistant from Joanna's team emailed me. She wanted to confirm a second meeting. I didn't hesitate this time. I told them to come in on Friday. I wasn't playing hard to get. I was just no longer trying to prove anything. Joanna arrived that afternoon precisely at 2. She wore no jewelry except a slim silver watch, her clothes, a soft beige this time. She looked around the office again, but now there was a quiet attentiveness to her gaze. "I read more of your writing," she said as soon as we sat down. "Your post from March. About dignity and silence." I knew the one she meant. I had written it on a plane back from a conference in San Francisco, trying to make sense of why walking away sometimes felt like winning. "It stayed with me," Joanna said. "Most people write for applause. You wrote for truth." I didn't respond. "I want you to lead something," she continued. "A new wing of Women Forward. We've been dancing around it, but this time I'm making the ask clear. I want you to head the initiative. Design it, drive it, own it, and Lydia. She'll find out when it's public." I stared at her for a long moment, watching her face. There wasn't a trace of doubt, not a flicker of manipulation, just calculation. Precision. She had done her homework, and now she was investing where she saw results. "Why me?" Joanna leaned forward. "Because everyone else I've worked with wants to be seen. You know how to make others feel seen. And that's rarer than any Ivy League credential." I thought about the years I spent working in the background, drafting other people's pitches, coaching them through media interviews, watching them rise while I stayed invisible. Maybe that was the training I never asked for but needed. "You're asking me to walk back into a space that once erased me," I said quietly. "No," she corrected. "I'm asking you to rewrite the entire architecture of that space." The offer stayed with me all evening. Nolan watched me from across the dinner table. "You're thinking hard," he said. "Joanna wants me to lead a national initiative. Do you want to?" "I think I do." "Then say yes." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because she's Lydia's mother-in-law. Because this puts me back in their orbit." Nolan reached for my hand. "Or it puts you in charge of your own gravity. You get to decide who orbits you now." The words landed in me like a stone dropped into calm water. The ripple moved slowly, but it moved deep. I opened my laptop and wrote back. "I accept. Let's meet Monday to discuss next steps." Then I opened a draft blog post, one I'd started weeks ago but never finished. The title was simple: "When They Finally See You." I wrote, "Not for sympathy, not for revenge, but for anyone who had ever been made invisible by the people they loved most." I didn't name names. I didn't need to. By the end of the night, the post was live. By morning, it had been shared over 4,000 times. And sometime around noon, I checked my phone again. Lydia's message was still there. The picture still untouched. I didn't respond. But this time I didn't feel guilty. I just whispered to myself, "She sees me now." And that is enough. The rain started that morning without warning, soft, steady, almost apologetic. I stood by the window of my apartment in Silver Lake, watching the droplets gather along the edge of the glass, then trail down in crooked lines. I hadn't seen rain in weeks. In some ways, it felt like a kind of blessing. I made my coffee slower than usual, letting the kettle hiss while I stared at the phone on the counter. No new messages, no missed calls. The silence wasn't haunting anymore. It felt earned. There was a time not too long ago when silence from my family made me feel like I didn't exist. Now it simply meant I had nothing left to prove. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. My blog dashboard was still up from the night before. More shares, more comments. Women I had never met were writing in from Ohio, Vermont, even as far as Alaska. They said things like, "I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear this." My sister did the same to me. I thought I was alone. I cried reading this. Not because I was sad, because I finally felt seen. That last one made my throat tighten. I didn't write for applause. But I did write so someone else wouldn't have to sit alone in a story they didn't ask to be part of. After breakfast, I pulled out the old leather box I kept in the back of the closet. Inside were pieces of my past I hadn't touched in years. Photos from college, notes from Lydia when we were kids, One tiny silver ring from our grandmother that used to be mine then became hers and was eventually returned in a silent envelope after the funeral. I held the ring for a long time. It was light, insignificant in my palm, heavy everywhere else. Eventually, I put it back. I wasn't sentimental anymore. Not about the wrong things. In the early afternoon, I walked to the nearby bookstore, the one Nolan and I used to frequent before the pandemic. The clerk remembered me. "You're the one from the article, right?" The girl behind the counter asked, tilting her head. "What article?" "That online piece. About women rebuilding after betrayal. Your photo was featured." I blinked. I didn't know it had been picked up beyond Verve style. I hadn't authorized that. But I just smiled. "Yes, I guess that's me." She beamed. "It helped me a lot. I'm not talking to my mother anymore. And I've been trying to feel okay about that." "You're okay," I said gently. "Sometimes we survive people we love. That doesn't make us cruel. It just makes us honest." Later that evening, I poured a glass of wine and returned to the same chair by the window. The rain had stopped, and everything outside looked rinsed clear, stripped of anything false. My phone lit up once more. Still the same photo. The baby girl still swaddled in hospital blankets, eyes closed in that way only newborns know. I hadn't responded for days. Lydia hadn't followed up. Maybe she expected nothing. Or maybe she expected me to show up anyway. She always had. I let the photo linger on my screen. I studied the tiny mouth, the delicate fists, the full weight of life wrapped in pink fleece. She was innocent. And so was I once. I whispered a quiet goodbye under my breath. To the child. To the years that formed Lydia and me. To the girl I used to be who thought love had to be earned through silence and sacrifice. Then I did the only thing left. I deleted the message, not out of anger, not out of pride, but because some endings need to be chosen, especially by the one who was never given the power to start anything. The next morning, I launched the first phase of our Women Forward mentorship program. My inbox was flooded with applications. Young women, single mothers, first-generation entrepreneurs, dreamers, who had never been told they mattered. Now they were hearing it from me. And the difference was this time I believed it too. My life didn't look like Lydia's Instagram stories. It didn't come with themed parties or curated applause, but it was mine. Honest, earned. Enough. To anyone listening right now who knows what it's like to be the quiet one, the overlooked one, the name left off the list, you're not forgotten. You're not too late. And you are not small. If someone chose to erase you from their story, maybe it's time to write your own. If you've ever had to rebuild from silence, I hope you'll share that story. There is power in telling the truth, and healing in being heard. Leave a comment. Let others know they're not alone. Hit like if this found you when you needed it. And if you're ready to stay for more journeys like mine, subscribe. We're not done yet. The comeback doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's just a woman choosing herself, and that choice is everything.